Braxton had trusted Damien with everything. His heart, his savings, and the dream that kept him going through 2 jobs and tired nights. For 3 years he had been filling a savings account, dollar by careful dollar, all for one goal, a small bakery of his own. He skipped vacations. He ate simple meals. He worked until his feet hurt. And through all of it, Damien smiled and said he was proud of him. What Braxton did not know was that Damien had been quietly draining that account for months. Small amounts at first, then bigger ones. By the time this rainy Tuesday night arrived, every single penny was gone. Braxton came home early from his second job because his shift ended sooner than expected. He was tired and a little happy about the extra rest. He pushed open the front door and immediately felt that something was wrong. Suitcases were open on the bedroom floor. Clothes were piled on the bed. And standing near the window was a man Braxton had never seen before, calm like he belonged there. Damien walked out of the bathroom and stopped when he saw Braxton. He did not look ashamed. He did not look sorry. He looked annoyed, like Braxton had shown up at the wrong time to the wrong place. Braxton looked at the stranger, then back at Damien, then at the suitcases. His brain was slow to understand what his eyes were already reading. "What is going on?" Braxton asked, though part of him already knew. Damien did not raise his voice. That was somehow worse. He spoke in a flat, unbothered tone and told Braxton the truth all at once. The cheating, the stolen savings, the fact that the apartment lease was only in Damien's name. He said it all like he was reading off a list. Then he looked at Braxton with cold, empty eyes and said, "This is not your place anymore. I pay the rent. Get out." Braxton stood there for a long moment. His mouth opened but no words came. His legs felt heavy. The man by the window looked away, uncomfortable. Damien turned his back and kept packing. So Braxton picked up his backpack. He grabbed the few things near the door that were clearly his. And he walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click that felt louder than a slam. Outside the rain was coming down hard. Not a light drizzle, the kind of rain that soaks through a jacket in seconds. Braxton stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the dark sky and breathed. Then he started walking with no direction, no destination, and no plan. His phone battery was at 11%. His mom lived 4 states away. His closest friends were asleep. He had nowhere to go and no money to get there anyway. He walked for a long time through empty streets, passing closed shops and yellow streetlights blurred by the rain. The backpack got heavier. His shoes were completely soaked. But he kept walking because stopping felt worse. He did not cry yet. The shock was too fresh for tears. He just walked and felt the cold and thought about 3 years of rice and beans and double shifts and a dream that was now gone because he had trusted the wrong person. He did not know yet that the night was not done with him. And he did not know that the worst moment of his life was walking him, step by soaking wet step, toward the best thing that would ever happen to him. The city at 1 in the morning looked like a different world. Most of the lights in the apartment buildings were off. The restaurants were closed and dark behind their metal gates. The only things moving were the rain falling in thick sheets and the occasional car splashing past without slowing down. Braxton walked through all of it without really seeing any of it. He had no destination. He just needed his legs to keep moving because if he stopped, he would have to sit with what had just happened, and he was not ready for that yet. So he walked. His shoes had stopped feeling wet and just felt heavy now, like blocks of cold attached to his feet. His hoodie was completely soaked through. The backpack on his shoulders held everything he had managed to grab. A change of clothes, his wallet with almost nothing in it, his phone charger, and a small photo of his grandmother that he always kept in the front pocket. He had not even thought about grabbing it. His hands had just known to take it. He passed a bus stop and thought about sitting there. But a bus at this hour going where? He passed a 24-hour convenience store and stood outside it for a moment, looking at the warm light inside. But he only had a few dollars and he felt too broken to go inside and pretend to be a normal person buying a normal thing. So he kept walking. After about 40 minutes, the neighborhood started to change. The buildings got bigger and shinier. The sidewalks were cleaner. There were glass towers with revolving doors and lobbies full of soft light. This was the business district, the part of the city that belonged to people with important jobs and important lives. Braxton had no business being here. But his feet had brought him here anyway. He slowed down when he saw a large glass building with a wide overhang above its side entrance. It was the kind of overhang meant for delivery trucks. A deep covered ledge that blocked the rain completely. Braxton stood under it and felt the sudden quiet of not being rained on. He exhaled slowly. There was a low concrete ledge along the wall, just wide enough to sit on. Braxton sat down. He put his backpack between his feet. He put his face in his hands. And finally, Alone under that overhang at the edge of a building that had nothing to do with him, he let himself cry. Not loud, messy crying, quiet, tired crying. The kind that comes when a person has been holding something heavy for too long and their arms just give out. He did not know how long he sat there. He did not know that above him, on the top floor of that building, a man named Geonwoo was still at his desk at 1 a.m. finishing work that most people would have gone home from hours ago. He did not know that in a few minutes, that man would take the elevator down, walk out this exact side door, and stop when he saw someone sitting in the rain dark with wet shoes and a broken face. Braxton just sat there in the only dry spot he could find in the whole cold city, and breathed and waited for something, though he could not have said what, to happen next. The rain kept falling just past the edge of the overhang, a curtain of water between Braxton and the rest of the world. He was alone. But not for much longer. The side door opened with a quiet mechanical click and a man walked out already talking on his phone. He was tall and moved like someone who was always on the way to something important. He wore a long black wool coat over a dark fitted suit. His black hair was neat even at this hour. His face was sharp, angular jaw, focused eyes, the kind of expression that said he was thinking about 3 things at once. He walked 2 steps out from the door and then stopped. He had almost stepped around Braxton without looking down. Almost. But he looked down. The man on the phone said something and then went quiet. Then he said, "I will call you back," and ended the call. He stood there for a moment looking at Braxton, soaking wet, backpack on the ground, eyes red, still catching his breath from crying. Most people in this neighborhood at this hour would have kept walking. This man did not. "Are you okay?" he asked. His voice was calm. Not cold, just measured like someone who chose every word carefully. Braxton looked up. He almost said yes out of habit. Instead, something in him, maybe exhaustion, maybe the fact that he had nothing left to protect, made him tell the truth. "Not even a little bit," he said. The man was quiet for a second. Something shifted in his face, not pity exactly but something more careful than that. Recognition maybe. Like he understood what it meant to answer honestly when everything inside you was in pieces. His name was Geonwoo, CEO of K-Star Solutions, the tech company whose name was on the building behind them. He was 35 years old and had spent the last 12 hours in meetings with people who smiled at him while hiding things. He was tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. He asked Braxton if he wanted to come inside and have something hot while he figured out his next move. Braxton looked at him for a long moment. He had no reason to trust this stranger. But he also had no reason not to. And it was very, very cold. He said yes. Inside the building's small security waiting room, a quiet space near the lobby with a coffee machine and 2 chairs, Braxton sat down and felt the warmth start to reach his skin. Geonwoo brought him a cup of hot tea from the machine without asking what he wanted, just brought it and sat across from him. And Braxton talked. He had not planned to. It just came out. The savings account, the 3 years of sacrifice, Damien's face when he said get out, the rain, the walking, all of it. He talked and Geonwoo listened. Not nodding politely while waiting for his turn to speak. Actually listening. He did not check his phone once. When Braxton finished, Geonwoo sat with the silence for a moment. Then he said the last thing Braxton expected to hear from a stranger in a suit at 1 in the morning. "There is a guest room in my penthouse upstairs. You can use it for a few nights until you figure things out." Braxton stared at him. "You don't know me." Geonwoo looked at him evenly. "I know enough." Braxton did not fully understand what that meant. But something in the way Geonwoo said it, not as a performance, not to seem kind, just as a simple fact, made him believe it. He said yes again. And this time the yes felt like the beginning of something. Braxton told himself 3 days. Maybe 4. He would stay in the guest room, dry out, figure out a plan, and be gone before he became a burden to a man he barely knew. That was the agreement, even if it was only with himself. The guest room was simple but comfortable. Clean white bedding, a window with a view of city lights, a small desk in the corner. Geonwoo had shown him where everything was and then disappeared back into his world of early mornings and late nights. They barely crossed paths during the day. Geonwoo left before sunrise and came home when the city was already dark again. Braxton spent the first 2 days quietly. He looked at his bank account and tried not to feel sick. He looked at apartment listings online and felt sicker. He contacted a few friends to let them know he was safe without explaining much. He applied to 2 jobs. He tried not to think about Damien. And then on the second night, when the silence of the big penthouse got too heavy, Braxton drifted into the kitchen. It was the largest kitchen he had ever been in outside of a restaurant. Everything was clean and expensive and barely used. Braxton opened the pantry out of habit and found basic ingredients: Flour, sugar, butter, eggs. Enough for something simple. Without really deciding to, he started baking. Just a small batch of shortbread cookies. Something his grandmother used to make. His hands knew the motions without his brain needing to direct them. He was pulling the tray from the oven when he heard the front door open. Geonwoo walked into the kitchen still in his work clothes, loosened tie, looking like a man who had been at war all day and was not sure the war was over yet. He stopped when he smelled the cookies. He looked at Braxton. Then at the tray. Then back at Braxton. Braxton shrugged. I needed to do something with my hands. Geonwoo sat down at the kitchen counter without being invited and accepted the cookie Braxton slid across to him. He ate it slowly like he was actually tasting it. Then he picked up his usual cup of tea, which he made himself with quiet efficiency, and sat there while Braxton cleaned up. They did not talk much that night. But neither of them left. That was the first night. Then it happened again the next night. And the night after that. Days stretched into a week and Braxton had not moved out yet because the room was there and the listings were expensive and leaving felt harder than he expected. Every night around 10 p.m. without planning it, they ended up in the kitchen. Braxton baking something, cookies, bread, small cakes, and Geon was sitting at the counter with his tea, watching with quiet eyes, occasionally saying something short and real. Braxton felt something building in his chest and pushed it down hard. He had just been wrecked by trusting someone. He was not doing that again. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Geonwoo felt it too and filed it away somewhere behind his work calendar and his quarterly reports and told himself it was just comfort. The simple human comfort of coming home to warmth and someone who was not trying to get something from him. Neither of them named it. Neither of them needed to yet. But the kitchen at 10 p.m. became the best part of both their days, and they both knew it and neither of them said so. 3 weeks. That was how long Braxton had been in the penthouse when he finally said out loud what he had been preparing to say since the first night. He had found a small room for rent across town. Nothing special, just a single room in a shared apartment, but it was affordable and it was a start. He told Geonwoo over breakfast, casual and clean, the way you announce a decision you have already made. Geonwoo looked up from his coffee. Good, he said. That makes sense. His face gave nothing away. His voice was level. He went back to his phone. But that night, long after Braxton had gone to sleep, Geonwoo stayed in the kitchen by himself. He sat on a stool and drank his tea slowly and stared at the countertop for a long time. He did not examine why. He was not someone who examined things like that. But he sat there for a very long time. The next day, before Braxton could do anything about the room across town, everything at K-Star Solutions collapsed at once. The new app, the one the whole company had been building for a year, the one Geonwoo had staked his reputation on, had been compromised. Someone had taken the full development plans and quietly passed them to a competing company. The rival was already moving. K-Star's legal team was scrambling. Geonwoo's business partners were calling. His investors were nervous. And no one knew yet who had done it. Geonwoo spent the entire day in crisis mode. Back-to-back calls. Emergency meetings. Legal reviews. His voice stayed steady all day because it had to. His face showed nothing because people were watching. He made decisions fast, kept the team calm, and moved through every room like someone who had everything under control. He did not have everything under control. He came home at 11:30 p.m. and walked straight past the kitchen. Then he stopped, turned around, and instead of going to his office or his bedroom like he normally would, he walked into the kitchen, lowered himself slowly to the floor, and sat with his back against the cabinet with his legs stretched out in front of him and his head tilted back and his eyes on the ceiling. He was still in his full suit. He had not even taken off his jacket. He had been there for about 10 minutes, completely still, when Braxton came in for water and found him. Braxton stood in the doorway and took in the scene. The CEO of a major company sitting on a kitchen floor in an expensive suit, staring at the ceiling with the particular stillness of someone trying very hard not to fall apart. Braxton recognized that stillness because he had worn it himself not long ago. He did not turn around. He did not make a joke. He walked over and sat down on the floor right next to Geonwoo, their shoulders almost touching, their backs both against the cabinet. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Braxton said quietly, I know what it feels like when someone you trusted blows everything up. Geonwoo turned his head slowly and looked at him. The CEO mask, that composed, controlled, nothing can touch me expression, cracked. Just for a second. Just enough to show that underneath it was a real person who was genuinely, deeply hurt. How do you keep going after that? Geonwoo asked. Braxton thought about it. Not a quick answer, a real one. You cry first, he said. Then you bake something. Then you figure out what comes next. Geonwoo looked at him for another long moment. And then, slowly he smiled. Not a polite smile. Not a professional smile. A real one, surprised out of him, quiet and warm, the kind that reaches the eyes. It was the first time Braxton had ever seen Geonwoo smile like that. He felt it everywhere. He had built that belief into the foundation of everything. And the betrayal at K-Star, someone he had promoted, someone he had trusted completely, had cracked that foundation in a way he was still figuring out how to stand on. Braxton listened the way Geonwoo had listened to him on that first rainy night. All the way. Without fixing or rushing. Then it was his turn. He told Geonwoo about his grandmother. Not just that she had taught him to bake, but who she was. A woman who worked hard her whole life and never had much but made every person who walked into her kitchen feel like they were the most important person in the world. She made everything from scratch. She had a way of putting love into food that Braxton had never seen anywhere else. She passed away 2 years before this story began, and the bakery was Braxton's way of keeping her alive. Of continuing something she had started. He had never told anyone that. Not fully. Not even Damien, who he had trusted with so much else. Geonwoo was quiet after Braxton finished. The kitchen was warm and still. Then we are going to make sure that happens, Geonwoo said. Braxton shook his head a little. You don't have to. I want to, Geonwoo said. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just still and sure and completely sincere. Braxton looked at him for a long moment and felt something in his chest shift. A gentle unlocking of something that had been sealed shut since the night in the rain. He did not say anything. But he stopped shaking his head. They stayed in the kitchen for another hour, not baking anything, just talking. Moving from the bakery to other things, to childhood memories and small embarrassments and the specific way a city feels at 3 a.m. when you are the only one awake. It was the kind of conversation that goes in every direction and somehow stays about one thing the whole time. That one thing was this. Both of them had been carrying something alone for a long time. And tonight, without planning it, they had put some of it down. The kitchen light hummed softly. Outside, the city went about its business. In here, something quiet and important was growing, not fast, not rushed, but real. The kind of real that does not need to announce itself. The dinner party was at a restaurant that Braxton would never have walked into on his own. It was the kind of place with no prices on the menu and waitstaff who moved like they were trying not to be noticed. Geonwoo had been invited by 2 colleagues, men in the same world of tech and investment who had known him for years. He had asked Braxton to come along, casual about it, saying only that it would be a quiet evening and he did not like going to these things alone. Braxton came. He wore the nicest thing he had in his backpack, which was a clean dark button-down, and he sat beside Geonwoo and listened to conversations about things he mostly did not know about. Geonwoo included him without making it obvious. A small explanation here, a question directed to him there. It was easy enough. The problem came when Braxton excused himself to find the restroom. He was walking back through a side hallway when he heard 2 voices from around the corner. He recognized one of them as belonging to a man named Henry, one of Geonwoo's colleagues, broad-shouldered, loud in the way that people are loud when they think they are being charming. Geonwoo always picks up strays, Henry was saying, and even though he said it quietly, the hallway carried sound well. He will get bored soon and send this one away too. The other voice laughed. Short and comfortable. Like it was an old joke they both already knew. Braxton stood in the hallway for a moment. Then he walked back to the table and sat down and smiled at the right times for the rest of the evening. But something had changed. Over the next few days, he went quiet in a way that was different from his usual quiet. He started arriving to the kitchen later, 11 p.m., sometimes midnight. He said he was tired when Geonwoo asked if everything was okay. He busied himself with apartment searches again and told himself that was the right thing to be doing anyway. The old fear had come back, wearing the voice of a stranger in a hallway. You do not belong here and he will eventually agree. Geonwoo noticed. He always noticed things quietly. He did not push, did not ask again after Braxton said he was fine. But the next morning Braxton came to the kitchen and found his favorite snacks on the counter. The specific ones he always reached for late at night. Not a grand gesture. Just proof that someone had been paying attention. It helped a little. But not enough. Then one evening Braxton came into the kitchen and found a single folded note on the table. Plain paper. Geonwoo's careful handwriting. I'm not Damien. I know you are scared. I'm scared too. But I am not going anywhere. Braxton read it once. Then again. Then 2 more times. He stood in the kitchen alone and let the note sit in his hands and felt something in his chest break open in the gentlest way, not painful but releasing. Like a window cracking open in a room that had been sealed shut too long. He cried. Not the worn-out crying from the rainy sidewalk. Something quieter and cleaner, the kind of crying that makes space. When he was done, he folded the note carefully and put it in the same pocket of his backpack where he kept the photo of his grandmother. The night after the note, Braxton did not go to sleep right away. He lay in the guest room, which he had been sleeping in for nearly a month now, which no longer felt fully like a guest room, and stared at the ceiling and thought about the note. About what it said and what it did not say. About the way Geonwoo moved through a room and the way he listened and the way he had sat on the kitchen floor in his expensive suit because he had nowhere else to put how he felt. About the fact that Braxton had been trying very hard not to feel something and had been failing for weeks. He got up at around midnight and walked down the hall. Geonwoo's office light was still on under the door, which was not surprising. Braxton stood outside it for a full minute. His hand was raised to knock and then it was not. Then it was again. He knocked. "Come in," Geonwoo said, like he had been expecting someone, though he could not have been. Braxton opened the door. Geonwoo was at his desk surrounded by open laptops and printed documents and the particular organized chaos of someone solving a complicated problem. He looked up. His expression was neutral the way it always was, but his eyes went careful and attentive in the way they did only when something actually mattered to him. Braxton stood in the doorway. He had planned to say something good. What came out instead was the truth. "I like you," he said. "A lot. And that terrifies me." Geonwoo went completely still. Not frozen, just fully present. All of his attention landed on this moment. He set down the pen in his hand. He looked at Braxton for a long time. Then he stood up from his chair slowly, the way someone stands when they want to be careful with a moment. "Good," he said. "Because I like you a lot too. And I have been trying to figure out how to say it for 3 weeks." It was not a movie moment. There was no music. Nobody swept anyone off their feet. They stood on opposite sides of the office and looked at each other in the middle of the night with all their fears still present between them and all their wanting still present too. And it was the most honest thing either of them had experienced in a very long time. They talked for another hour, not about the feelings exactly but around them, through them, the way two careful people slowly walk onto ice they are not sure will hold. Braxton asked what this meant. Geonwoo said he did not know but that he wanted to find out slowly and carefully with no pressure. Braxton said he needed slow. Geonwoo said slow was fine. Braxton asked if Geonwoo was sure. Geonwoo looked at him and said he was sure about very few things but this was one of them. When Braxton finally went back to the guest room, he did not lie awake anymore. He fell asleep quickly and for the first time in over a month, nothing hurt. Happiness, Braxton was learning, always seems to draw the past back like a smell carried on wind. Things had been good. Genuinely, quietly good. He and Geonwoo were not rushing anything. They had agreed on slow and slow felt right. There were small things. Geonwoo remembering how Braxton took his coffee. Braxton leaving something baked on the counter before Geonwoo came home. Longer conversations in the kitchen. A hand briefly touching an arm and neither person pulling away. It was new and fragile and real. Then Braxton's phone rang with a number he recognized immediately and wished he did not. Damien. He almost did not answer. Then he thought it was better to hear whatever this was directly than wonder about it. Damien's voice came through warm and careful, the voice Braxton remembered from the beginning, before he learned what lived underneath it. He said he had made a huge mistake. He said he had been thinking about Braxton every day. He said the man he had been with meant nothing and he had ended it. He said he was sorry in the particular way that people say sorry when they want something back, not when they actually feel sorry. Braxton listened to all of it without interrupting. Then he said, "No thank you," and ended the call. He told Geonwoo that evening. Geonwoo listened and nodded and said nothing dramatic. He just asked if Braxton was okay. Braxton said yes and meant it. But Damien did not stop there. When the call did not work, he started asking people in the neighborhood about Braxton. He heard that Braxton was living in a penthouse downtown with some rich Korean CEO. And Damien, who had never felt guilty about what he had done but had always been good at seeing opportunities, thought about that information for a day. Then he contacted a gossip blogger, a small-time one who covered city drama and had a decent following, and told a story. The story was this: Braxton had targeted Geonwoo deliberately. Had played helpless to get inside a rich man's home. Was using him for money and security. The story painted Braxton as calculating and Geonwoo as a naive victim. None of it was true. All of it was detailed enough to sound like it might be. The blog post went up on a Thursday. By Friday it had been picked up by 2 larger gossip accounts. By Saturday 3 of Geonwoo's business partners had called his personal number asking questions. His assistant forwarded him a screenshot with a short note that said simply, "You should see this." Geonwoo read the article alone in his office. His face showed nothing. His hands were still. He called Braxton into the living room that evening. Braxton walked into the living room and saw Geonwoo standing by the window with his phone in his hand. There was something in the way Geonwoo was standing, still and straight and composed, that made Braxton's stomach tighten. He had gotten good at reading Geonwoo's stillness. Some stillness meant thinking. Some meant unbothered. This one was the kind that meant controlled. Geonwoo turned and held out the phone. Braxton took it and read. He read the whole thing without stopping, even though he wanted to stop several times. When he was done, he handed the phone back and waited. This was the moment he had been bracing for without knowing it since the night of the kitchen confession. The moment when the world pushed in and complicated things. The moment when doubt would arrive on someone's face and he would have to watch it land. He looked at Geonwoo's face. There was no doubt. Not a flicker of it. Geonwoo looked at him with the same direct, unhurried steadiness that he always had. No new distance in his eyes, no question forming behind them. Just a man who had already decided what he believed and was not going to be moved by a blog post. "I know what is true," Geonwoo said. Simply. Completely. Braxton exhaled a breath he had not realized he was holding. "Do you want me to handle this?" Geonwoo continued. "Or do you want to?" Braxton thought about it. About Damien crafting that story. About what he had stolen, not just the money but now this trying to steal Braxton's new beginning too. He thought about what it would feel like to fight back this time instead of just absorbing the blow. "Both of us," Braxton said. Geonwoo nodded like that was the answer he had expected. What followed was not explosive or dramatic. It was precise. Geonwoo's legal team contacted the blog and the accounts that had shared the story, presenting a clear and documented account of what had actually happened. Geonwoo gave a brief, calm public statement. Not defensive, not angry, just factual. Several people in his professional circle who knew him well came forward without being asked and said the story did not match the man they knew. And Braxton, for his part, made a short post on his own small social media page. He did not attack Damien. He did not explain himself at length. He simply told his own story, who he was, what he had been building and what he was still building. He spoke about his grandmother. He spoke about the bakery. He wrote it plainly and let it be what it was. People believed him. Most people, when given two stories, can feel which one is real. The gossip faded the way gossip does when it has nothing new to eat. Damien, somewhere across town, watched it all not work. And had nothing to say. The week after the blog situation settled, Geonwoo finished what he had been quietly building for over a month. He had known for some time that the leak at K-Star Solutions had not come from a stranger or an outside hack. The damage was too precise, the timing too perfect. Whoever had done it knew the project from the inside. Its architecture, its timeline, its most vulnerable points. That meant it was someone trusted. Someone close. Geonwoo had said nothing and shown nothing while he worked. He had pulled server logs, cross-referenced access records, traced communication patterns. He had brought in one outside forensic tech consultant he trusted completely and told no one else. He had gone about every workday as if nothing was happening, sat in meetings with the guilty person present, answered their questions and assigned their tasks and nodded at their suggestions. The person was Preston. His head of development. Age 45, with the company from the early days, promoted 3 times, given equity, invited to every important dinner. A man Geonwoo had considered, if not a friend, then something close to it in the way that professional loyalties sometimes feel. Preston had sold the full development plans to a rival company for a large private payment. He had believed he had covered it well enough that nothing could be proven. He had continued showing up to work every day, looking Geonwoo in the eye. On a Tuesday morning, Geonwoo called a full company meeting. Every department head, every senior developer, every member of the leadership team. He stood at the front of the room in a dark suit and waited for everyone to settle. Then he laid it all out. Not with anger. Not with a raised voice. He presented the evidence the way he presented quarterly data, clean, structured, complete. Server logs. Transaction records. Communication traces. He gave everyone in the room enough information to understand exactly what had happened and exactly who had done it. Preston sat at the long table and went very still. Geonwoo finished presenting. He looked at Preston and said in the same calm tone he had used for the entire presentation, "I would like you to collect your things now." He walked Preston out of the building himself. Not with security. Not with drama. Just walked beside him down the hall, through the lobby and out the front door. When they reached the sidewalk, Geonwoo said nothing further. He simply turned and walked back inside. His legal team had already been in contact with the rival company. The stolen plans were legally blocked. Star's project was protected. The app would move forward. When Geonwoo got home that evening, Braxton had made dinner. Real dinner, not just baked goods but an actual meal set on the kitchen counter with 2 plates. Geonwoo sat down, looked at the food, and for a moment his face went soft in a way that almost no one ever got to see. "How did it go?" Braxton asked. "It is done," Geonwoo said. Braxton nodded. "Good." They ate together. That was enough. The space was on a busy street in a neighborhood that was alive even in the mornings. It was not large. Room for a counter, a display case for small tables, and a kitchen in the back that was just big enough to work in properly. The walls were old brick. The front window let in good light. The rent was high enough to feel real but low enough to be possible with the business loan Braxton had worked hard to qualify for. He stood in the empty space on the afternoon he first got the keys and turned in a slow circle and thought about his grandmother. He thought about her kitchen, the yellow curtains, the particular smell of butter and cinnamon that lived in the walls. The way she moved through that space like she owned every inch of it and was sharing it generously with the world. She had never had a real bakery. Just a home kitchen and a gift and a willingness to feed anyone who walked through her door. This was for her. Geonwoo had helped with the paperwork. Not doing it for Braxton but sitting with him at the kitchen table and going through every line of the loan documents and every clause of the lease so that nothing could be hidden and nothing could be taken. He had also quietly mentioned the new bakery to 3 food writers he trusted. People with genuine audiences who wrote honestly. He had not paid them or pressured them. Just mentioned it. The rest was up to Braxton. Braxton named the bakery Nana's Golden Table. The sign was warm gold lettering on dark wood. Simple and right. Opening day was a Saturday in early spring when the weather had just turned soft and the city was in the mood to be outside. Braxton had been at the bakery since 4 a.m. He had baked everything from scratch: shortbread, honey rolls, spiced pound cake, the small filled pastries his grandmother made every Sunday. The display case was full by 7 a.m. He unlocked the front door at 8 a.m. By 8:15 there were 12 people in line. By 9 a.m., the line went past the door and around the corner of the building. None of the 3 food writers had posted yet. They had agreed to come by that morning. The people in line were neighbors and people who had seen a flyer or heard from someone else or simply smelled something good walking past. They came in and ordered and tasted and their faces did the thing that faces do when food is made with actual love, a kind of quiet surprise like they were not expecting to feel something. The food writers came and tasted and wrote. What they wrote was true and kind because the food was true and kind. Geonwoo arrived at noon after the first rush. He stood in the doorway and looked at the full room, every small table taken, the line still moving, Braxton behind the counter moving fast and certain in his own space. And something moved across his face that was not quite a smile but was more than one. Braxton looked up, saw him and grinned. Somewhere across the city, Damien saw the photos that would later appear online and had absolutely nothing to say. After the opening day crowd went home and the display case was empty and the sign in the window was turned to closed, Braxton sat on the floor of Nana's Golden Table in his apron and did not move for a while. Not because he was sad. Because he was full in a way that was new to him. The kind of full that comes when something you worked for and grieved for and almost lost actually arrives. He sat there in the quiet of his grandmother's bakery and let it settle into him. Geonwoo had stayed to help clean up without being asked. He washed the trays. He put the chairs up. He did all of it without fuss, in his expensive coat with the sleeves pushed up, and said nothing because nothing needed to be said. When Braxton finally stood up, Geonwoo was leaning against the counter waiting. They locked up together and walked home in the spring night air without rushing. The city was warm and unhurried for once. They did not fill the silence. They did not need to. Back in the penthouse kitchen, their kitchen now, the place that had started everything, Geonwoo made tea and Braxton cut the one thing he had saved back from the bakery, a small square of the spiced pound cake his grandmother had taught him to make. He put it on a plate between them. They sat at the counter side by side the way they always did, and the kitchen was warm and the city hummed outside. After a while, Geonwoo said something he had been holding for a long time. "Before you," he said quietly, not looking at Braxton but at the plate between them, "I thought being strong meant not needing anyone." Braxton listened. "I built everything alone on purpose," Geonwoo continued. "I thought that was what it meant to be solid. To not require anything from outside yourself." He paused. "I was wrong about that." Braxton looked at him. This careful, precise, genuinely good man who had sat on a kitchen floor in a suit and written a note on plain paper and walked a trader out of his own building and washed dishes in a bakery without being asked. He thought about everything that had happened in the months between a rainy sidewalk and this kitchen counter. "Nana always told me," Braxton said slowly, "that the bravest thing a person can do is let somebody love them right." Geonwoo turned and looked at him. Something in his face opened up, not dramatically but completely. Like a door finally swinging wide after a long time held shut. He nodded slowly. And that was it. That was the whole of it. No grand speech. No dramatic moment. Just two people who had both been broken by the wrong hands, sitting together in a warm kitchen in the middle of an ordinary night, having finally found the right ones. They stayed in the kitchen long after the tea was gone. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they did not. The pound cake got eaten slowly, one small piece at a time. Outside, Damien had nothing. Preston was gone. K-Star was standing. The bakery sign was gold on dark wood and would be there tomorrow morning when the city woke up. And in the kitchen, Braxton and Geonwoo sat close together and talked about everything and nothing, the way people do when they have all the time in the world and have decided to use it well.